Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. And today guys, I'm going to be talking about the main problem with my content. Now, what am I talking about specifically? Well, I sit here in Melbourne, Australia, making videos for you guys around the world, whether you watch my content from somewhere in America, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in Asia or South America, wherever. And at the end of the day, guys, I don't know what is going on the other side of that screen, right? I just sit here making videos and I hope, and I'm hoping that they're helping you guys. I'm praying that some of the information's actually sticking. But at the end of the day, I really don't know what is contributing to your solo queue climb, what isn't contributing to your solo queue climb. I listen to your feedback, but I don't even know if that's just a small percentage of you guys watching my videos. I'm really in the dark here, so I'm really trying to figure this out. And at the end of the day, all I talk about in my videos are just theories that work for me. Things that have worked for me on my own climb, or maybe with my own coaching clients in Oceania, that sort of thing. Now, I wanted to know specifically what was and wasn't contributing to someone's solo queue climb. How come one person who watches the exact same videos as someone else is climbing 3, 4, 5 divisions, whereas someone else is literally hard stuck 500 games and has no idea what is going on, right? And my job as a coach or a content creator is to really figure out what is at play here so I can refine my content, or even just, explain this information through a video so there's not a single person who watches my content that is stuck. Because at the end of the day, guys, if I see one person, or I see this sometimes on my channel, I see comments like, Curtis, I've watched all your content and I'm still stuck. Well, I actually take that as a personal attack. It's not your fault, it's my fault, but I take it very personally because that's a problem. Like, that's a big problem. If you're not even climbing one single division and you've watched all of these videos, then what am I doing wrong? There has to be something that I'm just not sharing. Maybe the way I'm getting across the information, there's something not going right here. So my goal with this video and this little experiment that I did was trying to figure out what exactly was at play here. Now, my intention by the end of this video, guys, is for you to have more of an idea about what you may be struggling with at your given rank and give you actionable steps moving forward so there is no excuse. I don't want to see any more comments saying, Curtis, I've watched like 20 of your videos and I've actually gotten worse, like that sort of thing. I just don't want you guys to have an excuse to really not climb, guys. Now, how did I approach this problem? So what I actually did was went ahead and spoke to a range of differing people. Some I actively coached in the past, others just watched my YouTube content. Of these people, some climbed only one division, some were hard stuck 500 games, some climbed 2 or 3 divisions, others climbed 6 or more divisions. And today, we're actually going to be covering one player who actually went from Gold 3 to Diamond 4 within a 2-month period from both my coaching and my content. Now, it actually makes perfect sense after I spoke to this guy, why exactly this guy had amazing results, whereas other people didn't really have that great results at all. So when I was actually talking to these people, I asked them a range of differing questions about their solo queue schedules, their mentality, in-game stuff, to really try and figure out what the trends were, if any existed in the first place. Because there was an actual reality, or there was a potential reality where there was no trends at all and everyone's problems were unique, and I was just, I wasn't going to find anything. But I come in with an open mindset, hoping to find some form of trends. So let's get into the details, guys. Now for analogy time here, guys. So let's take Bob here, the average platinum player. And the way I like to view it is that there's 2 overarching skill sets. There's the out-of-game traits, which revolve around improvement, mentality, tilt, that sort of thing. And then on the right-hand side here, we have in-game ability. And these are very specific, like, CSing, trading, side lane awareness, champ identity understanding, that sort of thing. And both of these contribute to Bob's here platinum rank. So if we were to take a look at Bob's out-of-game traits, it might look something like this. Obviously this is very hypothetical and we'll never be able to get an accurate representation of it, but it will look something like this, where his focus is below average, but his mental resilience is, around average, note-taking below average, his VOD reviewing is terrible, but his muting ability is very, very good. He knows exactly when to mute, and he's very good with the mute button. And on the right-hand side here, we take a look at his in-game ability. His champ identity understanding is around average, CSing and trading below average or way below average, but his skill shot accuracy and his side lane awareness are actually relatively, high level. Now, the reason this is important to understand is that you can be very, very good in certain aspects of your game, which actually largely compensate for these these worse aspects. So maybe Bob here is actually so good at skill shots and plays champions like Zareth and Vel'Koz and Ziggs, that actually largely compensates for his poor CSing. He just wins trades so often, or maybe he gets into mid game, hits all these skill shots, and they just win the game. I don't know, right? So this can happen at all ranks, and I see it actually a lot in high elo, where you get players who are actually very good mechanically, their fundamentals are great, their skill shot accuracy, CS trading, but their mental resilience is so low, their focus is terrible, they autopilot all the time, they don't really care too much about winning, or maybe they just get tilted and rage at their teammates all the time, so they're never really able to climb above their rank. Now, and what's also interesting, guys, what I've noticed about people who watch my content, there'll be certain videos that they resonate with, whether it's the coin flip video and they really resonate with it, and it actually increases maybe one element of their outer game traits. And that actually gives them such a boost that it actually allows them to climb maybe 1 or 2 divisions. On the flip side, maybe it was a champion identity video or a champion guide that actually allowed their champ identity understanding to grow, or maybe their trading improved significantly, which actually allowed them to climb 1, 2, 3 divisions, that sort of thing. Now, this is an analogy that may not resonate with you. I don't know. We're going to refer back to it a lot throughout this video, but I did just want to get this out there as a way to kind of view what contributes to your specific rank. Now, what I found after all of my interviews is that players fell into one of 3 categories. The first category are the Malders, right? And the Malders generally have solid fundamentals, their micro is great, their game knowledge is pretty decent, champ identity understanding great also, but they are largely held back by a lack of intensity and poor mental. And generally this overlaps with poor solo queue schedules as well. And generally these are the people that are playing below their level of play and playing below their potential. Now, if they were to, fix their mental, play at 100% intensity and not tilt, they could be upwards of 3 or 4 divisions higher than what they are now. And generally, these are the players that have 3 division swings, right? They go from all the way from like gold 1 all the way down to gold 4, or platinum 1 all the way to platinum 4. They swing back and forth very, very rapidly, and they're not really consistent at all. Now, the second category are the boomers, and this is actually where I fit in, where boomers usually have a solid mental, and this generally overlaps with having great solo queue schedules. They actively consider what is best for their improvement, having solid learning objectives. They don't play nearly as many games as the Malders, but this, as a result, means that they have way less swings, right? They may go from gold 1 to gold 2, but they're not going to go from gold 1 all the way down to gold 4, then back up to gold 1. They have way less swings, which means they're a little bit more consistent in their level of play. But the reason they're not climbing is because they just don't have the level of micro, or they don't have the game knowledge required to climb. And the third category is the KFC Variety Bucket. This is where I would say 75% of people fall into. Generally, if you're in this bucket, you have a wide variety of strengths and weaknesses and a combination of in and out of game issues. This can make the league experience incredibly frustrating at times because you really don't know what is going wrong. Now for the Malders, guys. So the Malders will actually get the quickest and most immediate results from my content. Now, I actually have a quick analogy I want to share with you in order to get your head around what the hell I'm actually talking about here. So let's just say I've got me and my car, and I've been driving my car for a very long time, taking it on a bunch of road trips, maybe driving around the country, and maybe I haven't actually got it serviced in a very long time. Now, as a result, the brakes are going to get a bit squeaky, maybe the steering's getting a bit stiff, maybe it sounds like crap, it smells like crap, and it's really just not driving as fast anymore. Eventually, I decide to take it to the mechanics, hand over my wallet and say, please guys, can you fix it up and bring it back to the state it was when I initially purchased the car? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think this best exemplifies the solo queue experience for the average molder, right? So they play a bunch of games over a long period of time, and over a series of just tilt sprees, raging, playing without intensity, poor solo queue schedules, for whatever reason, over time, for whatever reason, they're actually not playing at their level of play anymore. They're playing way below what their actual skill set would have otherwise represented. And then eventually, they watch my coin flip video, they watch my psychology playlist, or they come to me, I help them, and I actually don't make them better. I actually just get them back to their level of play, or just where their skill set actually represents in terms of, the actual ladder. in terms of actual skill. So generally, I'm hoping that that analogy really kind of resonates a little bit, but that's the way I interpret the average molder in solo queue. So if you are a hardcore molder, here is what I would recommend to develop a stronger mental and a learning mindset. The first one here is to limit your solo queue sessions to 3 or 4 games max. Ideally, keeping to yourself and using the time in between the games to either review or reflect on the previous game. Now, the main reason I want to actually highlight here, ideally keeping to yourself, is because nearly every single person who had the most insane results from watching my content or coaching clients had the habit of turning off Discord completely or literally just not talking to anyone else in queue or in between the games to maintain that focus and maintain that intensity. And by keeping to 3 to 4 games max, it's a very great way of, ensuring that the games that you do play, you're going to come in with max amount of energy, max amount of intensity, because as soon as you start to play 4 onwards, you're going to drop to that 80%, 70%, 60% intensity or focus, which again is definitely not going to help you climb, because you need to be, really nearing that 100% if you want to climb and not tilt yourself or anyone around you. The second point, set 3 learning objectives, and in review, spend 85% of the time directing your energy towards these 3 specific learning objectives. This will help facilitate the learning mindset over focusing on LP. If you do not have any learning objectives, your default response is to be like, okay, well, I don't really know what I need to improve on. There's so many things I could have actually improved on in that game. I'm just going to go up and queue next. And the only metric I'm actually going to look at is just, did I get LP or did I lose LP? And yes, that is an important metric to look at, but you also just need to be looking at these 3 learning objectives, or 2 or 3 learning objectives, because that's going to help facilitate this learning mindset over time. And we'll touch on this a little bit more later on in this video. Third one, review every single game, even if it's just briefly, just to touch on those specific learning objectives. And again, we're going to talk about this concept later on in the video, where we're going to talk about specifically how to improve at a skill. Now, note, guys, I got a little note here. There was a direct correlation between the amount of games reviewed and the amount of divisions climbed, right? So I got a note here that says, every player that reviewed over 50% of their games climbed over 3 divisions in a relatively short period of time. Every single one. Every single player that reviewed over 50% of the games climbed more than 3 divisions. Okay? So this is a very important thing to understand, and we'll talk about this later, but just get it thinking and get those creative juices flowing. Fourth one here, disable chat or mute all every game. Usually the people that had the most success re-enabled pings but disabled emotes still. The fifth one here, stop playing immediately after tilting or even just take a very large break. Number 6, don't even queue up if you're not completely ready to focus. This will prevent yourself from tilting at your own stupid mistakes. And number 7, refer to my psychology videos. The coin flip one especially seems to have been very, very effective. Maybe watch that one a few times. And number 8, play normals, flex queue, or on a second account if you want to learn champions or have fun. And lastly, number 9, don't feel the need to play League. You don't always need to play League of Legends. There's plenty of other games out there. If you're not feeling it, you're not up for that ranked experience, or you just overall just need a break from the game, play another game and come back to it tomorrow or the day after. Don't feel the need to always play League. Now for the boomers. So boomers actually take much longer to climb, but get the most value out of coaching. Now, if you're a boomer like me, here is what I would recommend. Dedicate a portion of your solo queue schedule to watching pro players or high elo players play the matchups you are struggling with the most on your main champions, and be very, very specific within the reviews. Pause the VOD and ask yourself, what would I do in that situation? But make sure you're playing devil's advocate and not just blindly following what they would do in that situation. Number 2, create a champion matchup spreadsheet. Now, what I mean by this is literally go into Google Sheets, and let's just say your main champion is Orianna. And what you have is Orianna versus Ari, Orianna versus Brand, Orianna versus Cassio, and you literally have one for every single matchup. And then next to each of these names, you'll have, okay, whether it's the way you want to play the early lane, tips for builds, tips for runes, tips for game pace, cooldown differences, whatever. And then when you're loading up into a game, you see yourself versing Ori versus Cassio, you can control F, whatever, find the Ori versus Cassio notes and compare and remind yourself, okay, all right, in this matchup, I need a hard push level 1, or I need to be careful of this, or this cooldown here at level 6, I need to do this. And then you're going to really start to be able to refine those little details and add a lot more consistency into your gameplay, because boomers, their main problem is just game knowledge and game specific stuff. It's nothing to do with the mental aspect of the game. Number 3, if CS is your problem, one of the clients that I actually spoke to, one of my coaching clients, he had a big problem with CSing. What he actually did was went into practice tool every single day and did 3 times 5-minute sessions of itemless CSing, aiming for perfect CS before he went into ranked. So give that a shot. It might work for you. It definitely worked out for him. Number 4, use the champion guides religiously to better understand the small micro details in champion identity, because this will add consistency to your decision making and overall gameplay. Number 5, guys, another common trend within boomers is that a lot of the time they weren't playing enough ranked games, or they just simply couldn't decide on a champion pool. So they had like 20 or 30 individual mid-champs played in ranked. So what I recommend is to have a small champion pool of 2 or 3 champs and have at least 60 or more ranked games played on each of those champions. Otherwise, you're not even going to come up on the radar of champion mastery. Now, what's interesting, from all of my coaching clients or people who've watched my content, there was not a single one that got good results and had a champion pool greater than 3 or 4 champions. For all the people that played more than this amount of champions, they did not have good results, which was, made a lot of sense to me. Number 6, the mid fundamental series will be your best friend, and that series alone, in combination with the champion guides, is enough information to get you at least to mid diamond, guys. Now for the KFC Variety Bucket. So if you fall in this category, like the most of you will, I highly recommend putting an emphasis on fixing the mental or out of game elements first, then transitioning to the in-game. Now, here are a few interesting findings that may give you some direction if you fall into this category. Every player that climbed from gold to platinum did it through lane fundamentals alone. Specifically, timing trading with CS, understanding trading patterns, and awareness of cooldown differences, and basic warding and leaning. None of them climbed from gold to platinum through mid-game macro. And number 2, the 2 common trends for people climbing from platinum to diamond were, number 1, playing more selfishly, which is, in my opinion, the incorrect usage of the word. And by selfishly, they basically meant only making decisions which were coherent with their champion's identity. Now, if there was like this really bad fight happening in the river and their team's like spam pinging them, but they know they can't go into the river or they'll die or that sort of thing, or they knew it was just the incorrect call, they would not go to it. They wouldn't compensate. They would stay in the lane, value their farm, that sort of thing. So basically, that's the way they viewed selfishly, but all it was just making decisions that is best for them and screwing everyone else. Number 2, jungle tracking, teammate awareness, and map play, and specifically your own jungler's awareness. And I noticed a lot of people said this, where as soon as my awareness grew of where my jungler's location was, they were able to make much better quality decisions. So this was a very common trend for the people that climb from platinum to diamond. Now, number 3, I had a lot of people tell me that they added in specific champions into their pool in order to improve at specific areas of their gameplay. So people who wanted to improve at their lane fundamentals or macro game learnt champions like Galio, Twisted Fate, or Annie. And then people who really wanted to get that more aggressive mindset or get better at the micro element of the game added champions like Aurelia, Silas, and Zed into their pool, which I found very interesting. And that's actually not something that I really recommended too much, but it seemed to actually work for a decent amount of people. Now for a few more interesting findings, guys. The first one was that 95% of people who actually duoed did not climb at all, and all of their climbing was done when they solo queued. The next one, every time when I asked them, do you review games? It always felt like they knew that they should be reviewing games, but they don't. And the same thing actually happened when I asked them if they mute people, even though they knew they got tilted from others. And this was again present when asked about like, do you record learning objectives? So one thing, guys, I really want to hear this in the comments below is, if you know that it's wrong, or if you know that doing these things would increase your chances of winning or climbing, why don't you do it? This is just me. I really don't understand this, and I feel like if you really wanted to climb and you're watching all of my content and you're doing whatever it takes to climb, shouldn't the basics of reviewing games, having learning objectives, and muting others even though they tilt you just be common sense? So let me know in the comments below why you guys think this is the case, because I really want to learn more about the psychology behind this. Next one. listening to music did not change much at all. There was a lot of people that actually did listen to music and still had a lot of results. Now, so that actually proved me wrong. I thought that listening to music would be a negative thing, but although most of the time the music that was listened to was non-lyrical, like mainly jazz music or light EDM with no lyrics, that sort of thing. Next one, no one really watched any pro VODs or any other people playing the same matchups, which I found very surprising because I find that to be one of the best ways to improve at your understanding like of a specific matchup is, say I play Orianna into Yasuo, the first thing I want to do is go on YouTube, type Orianna versus Yasuo, and just watch a bunch of other people play the same matchup to try and just compare. What did they do? Did that work? Did that not work? Just really try and improve my understanding of the game. And lastly here, most people got bored of playing the same champion, and then what happened, it started that cycle where they lost a lot of elo changing their champion pool, which really got me interested or really confused because why not just play on a second account or even just play normals or flex queue? Why go from being an Orianna one trick from gold 4 to gold 1 to randomly trying to play Riven mid or Riven top and going all the way from gold 1 all the way down to gold 4 again? Like, couldn't you have just done that in normals or flex or on a second account? Like, do you have to get rid of all that hard work? So again, let me know in the comments below. I just found that fascinating and it's such a common occurrence. It just blew my mind. Now, I get a lot of questions from you guys in the community asking, Curtis, how exactly do you improve at a skill? You always tell me to review my games and pick learning objectives, but how do I actually get better at that skill? So what I'm going to do now is break down the process that I actually go through, and this is just what works for me, right? This is not scientific, it's not proven by anyone else, I haven't read this anywhere, this is literally just what worked for me personally. Step number 1. Before being able to improve at a skill, I believe that you need to know what a good and bad version of that skill looks like, right? So this is essential in my opinion for being able to identify the mistake in the first place. And you can do this, or you can learn this from either my content, watching other high elo player VODs, or just other content in general, or even just coaching. Step number 2, identify the problem or the error or the mistake. Sometimes this is done by literally just watching the VOD and seeing it. Other times it's done by using the reverse engineering technique where I go into the VOD, go to the moment where the game boomed, and then go backwards from that point to see what contributed to that specific occurrence. Step number 3, guys, ask yourself, why was this mistake made? And be very, very specific. Now, if you don't understand what I'm talking about here, in a second, we're going to go through a bunch of differing examples, so stay tuned. And in this step, guys, we also need to know what the optimal decision was in this moment and why that was the case. Because if you don't know why a decision was made, you're going to waste a lot of time making the same mistake over again and again and again. And then lastly, step 4, note it down, queue up, review this element again, refine, repeat the process. So let's actually do this for improving at CSing. Let's actually go over an example. Step number 1, we already know what good and bad CSing looks like, pretty self-explanatory. Step number 2, identify the time in the VOD you missed the CS, again, pretty self-explanatory. Now step number 3, I will pause the VOD on that moment, at that specific moment, and ask myself, what made me miss this CS specifically? And this is why, by the way, the point of view VOD is very important because you need to see what you were looking at in that moment, right? Was my attention focused on trading, or was my attention focused elsewhere on my ward usage or the jungle's location or whatever? Was it because I wasn't preparing the minions and making one obviously lower? Was it because my wave location was in a bad spot, making it risky for me to walk up so I didn't feel safe getting that CS? Was it because I was in a hard matchup and maybe this is just the reality of the situation? I can't get the CS because he can just zone me at this point in time. Was I unnecessarily scared even though the enemy used cooldowns? I don't know. I go through all of these things and ask myself these questions. What made me miss this CS specifically? Trying to figure it out. Now, once I have identified the reason for missing the CS and I know what the optimal course of action was in that moment and why that was the optimal decision, I then ask myself, what are the signs for me to be able to make this decision next time, right? And what I mean by signs, these are like generally the red flags or the signals or whatever you want to call it that scream at you to tell you what the correct decision actually is. So for CSing, it might be, okay, As soon as this guy, the enemy Syndra, used E on the wave, that was a signal for me to be able to go up and prepare the CS, or that was a signal for me to be able to go up and last hit, or whatever it is. You actually be able to see what these signs are when you get into the VODs to see next time, okay, if I'm in this situation, I know what to look for in order to make this decision next time. It's very important you ask yourself this question, because if you don't, then you're not going to know exactly what to look for the next game you actually play. And note, generally the trend is very obvious, so you don't need to review every single CS. It should become very apparent very quickly. And then step number 4, I make a note in my Google document or my notepad. I queue up, I refine. And this is also, guys, why I like to review straight after each game, not at the end of the entire session. I would say 85% of the people that I interviewed reviewed all of their games at the end of the entire solo queue session. So after the 3 games, I would go through and watch all of their VODs, which I think is actually very bad, because you're not completing the learning cycle. And the way the learning cycle works is that you execute, you review, you get into that review process, then you identify what is wrong and what you need to do next time, then you go back into the next game and then try and implement that learning, and then review again. So it's like a 4-step process, so you can actually complete that learning cycle. Because at the end, what's going to happen, so say you review at the end of your entire session, you're gonna do it. You're going to review what went wrong. You're going to talk about what you need to do next time, but there's no last step. You can't actually execute on your learning. It's just going to go into thin air. Nothing's actually going to happen, or that process is going to take much longer. This is actually why I like to review after every single game. Now let's go through the same example, but with warding. So step number 1, from my warding fundamentals or my tracking, jungle tracking videos, you should know what a good and bad ward looks like, or just good and bad warding in general looks like. Step number 2, go into the VOD and go to the time I placed the vision, or you placed a vision trinket or a control ward. And then step number 3, I'll go to this moment within the VOD and pause and ask myself, what made me use this ward in this location and at this time specifically? Was there a better location or time to place this ward? Was it because I was lazy, or did I feel rushed for some reason? Maybe I was holding on to 2 trinkets and really wanted to use one. Was it because I was scared to put it deeper? Was it because I really wanted to lean onto this side because the next objective was a dragon? And did this ward actually change my behavior or change what I could have done within the lane, right? Once I've identified the main issue with the ward placement, I will again identify why the optimal usage of the ward placement is where it is, then noting down the signs and the ways to know how to place my ward better in the next game, all right? Again, you always got to bring it back to the signs or the signals, or what is the game telling you, or what is the information, what the information do you need to look out for in order to make the optimal decision, right? And again, the trend should be very obvious after a few reviews of your warding, in which you should be able to, easily note that down. Now, some of the common problems for me personally with warding were not taking into account which side was winning lane, not taking into account the next objective, focusing on trading too much and sitting on 2 wards, being lazy and putting them in bad spots, that sort of thing. Now, the next objective would be a great sign or a great way of me knowing where to place my ward, right? So then I know, okay, I need to think about what the next objective is, or when it is up, or something like that. Then you can get very, very specific in terms of what information are you not processing, in which you need to, or where you need to bring your attention in order to make the most optimal decision, right? And then step number 4, make a note in my notepad. Again, rinse, repeat. Now again, for trading, step number 1, from my champion guides or other pro VODs, you should know what a good and a bad trade looks like for that champion, given their identity and the lane matchup. Step number 2, you go into the VOD and start breaking down specific trades. Step number 3, I'll pause at that moment of the VOD and ask myself, what made this trade go so poorly? Was it because I wasn't aware of the enemy's range or cooldowns? Was it because I was trying to get a CS, or because they were spiking before me? Did I even need to take this trade? What made me think I needed to in the first place? Could I have foreseen this ability or avoided it in any way? Could I stand behind the minions here? Or was there a sign for them to be able to, like the way they were posturing, could I have actually noticed the way they were going to use their ability? Did I simply just get out-tethered, in which that's a skill gap? This happens to me all the time, where people just have better micro than me, and I actually just get out-tethered by the enemy, in which I need to improve my clicking distance. That's just a skill gap because I'm a boomer, that sort of thing. Now again, once I've identified the main issues with this trade, I will then reiterate what the optimal trade or decision would be in this situation, and again, rinse repeating for all of the trades during the laning phase to identify the trends in my decision making. Common problems with trading for me personally were not identifying cooldown differences, not faking CS to go for trades, as well as faking abilities through posturing, not tethering the enemy, so my clicking distances are not good enough. And in terms of clicking distance, what I mean by that is just like, you know, if this is my character, if your clicks are really far away from your character, like out here and here, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to, you know, be very specific in your movement because your mouse has got to go from all the way here to here. This distance is very long. But if your character is here and your clicks are very close to your character, your movements are much more accurate and you can actually have much better micro. And that really comes with time. You can use third-party programs or whatever, like, or those flash games, sorry, LOL dodge game or things like that in queue to really improve your click accuracy. And then number 4, rushing abilities and just missing obvious ones due to not understanding the matchup. Now, step number 4, I will then take note of the signs to create better trades, rinse, repeat. And note, guys, for trading, because trading's a little bit different, it is largely knowledge and muscle memory. So what this whole review will do for me is really just improve my knowledge, and I just need to go over it again and again and again until it's muscle memory, because you can't really afford to just actively think about trading like you would be able to with, like, say, lane assignments, team fight, or like, I guess, positioning and team fighting, side lane awareness, jungle tracking, that sort of thing. Now we're going to break down what the specific coaching client did in order to climb from gold 3 to diamond 4 in such a short period of time. Now, he was actually stuck in gold 4 for quite a while, and he said during this time he used to get tilted often, and this was largely because he just didn't mute people. So when he eventually got to gold 3, he decided to mute people nearly every single game. Now, he was actually stuck in gold 4 and gold 3 for a while as well, because he didn't pay attention to any of the details within his laning. He was basically just throwing out abilities aimlessly, hoping that they would just land. And funny enough, he was one of my initial coaching clients that I did ages ago. I'll actually link the coaching session in the description below if you want to check it out, when he was in gold 3. And in his first session with me, he was getting out traded all the time. He had no idea what he was doing in the early laning phase, and because of my coaching and the content, it actually allowed him to specifically hone in on identifying cooldown differences and trading patterns, which then in turn not just helped him win lanes, but also prevented him from losing as hard in the laning phase. Now, he had 3 learning objectives at all times. These were elements of his game where he wanted to improve. And the reason he said for his 3 learning objectives were, he said, League has so many things to learn. It was overwhelming, so breaking them down into parts really helped me a lot. His learning objectives were noted down in an extensive Google document which rated his level of competence at each skill. So let's just say there was CSing, there was trading within the first 5 minutes, and then there was warding in the first 10 minutes of the game, right? These were these 3 learning objectives. Then, or he would have a bunch of them, right? But he would only focus on 3 at a time. Within each of them, he would rate them like a color rating, and the color would represent how competent or how good he is at that specific skill. And until that was at a specific skill, he would then move on to another learning objective. He actually reviewed 90% of his games, and mainly spending around 85-90% of the energy and attention directing towards those 3 specific learning objectives. And this was super interesting. He filled out 1 champion identity sheet a week to better understand mid-champions and matchups, which I found really, really awesome. And he would also only play in blocks of 3. Any more than that, he said he loses focus, and he only wanted to play at 100% capacity, and his reviews were done at the end of the block to maintain momentum, which, you know, it worked for him. I personally wouldn't go about that, but it made sense. He also, during his solo queue box, did not talk to any of his friends, even in between games. He would just really just hone in, be by himself, so he could just maintain focus for those 3 specific games. He muted people as soon as 1 word was spoken, and if he made a bad play, even if no one said anything, he would instantly mute his team, just in case, you know, someone flamed him or something like that. And if he wasn't feeling great, or maybe he was just tilted, or wasn't ready to deal with the intensity of a ranked match, he just wouldn't play at all. Sometimes for days, he wouldn't even play League. He would just play other games, something like that. He said he played a lot of normals with friends to relax and help focus on champion mechanics. And Platinum to Diamond for him, he said, was all about playing greedy, focusing on his farm, not compensating for others, and having a play for yourself mentality. And he said the micro details from the champion identity understanding from the champion guides really allowed him to be consistent, especially the Z guide. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm hoping that you can at least take one thing away from this video. I'm hoping that there's not a single person who watches my content that is hard stuck. Please execute on the things that I spoke about within this video. I tried to make it as pragmatic and as practical as possible. Hopefully it helps. Let me know your story, or I would love to hear more about you in the comment section below. I really appreciate all the support. Cheers.